We've talked on the show about insight and whether insight is helpful in terms of changing your mental state and physical state. Today on the podcast, I want to talk about why insight is important, but not enough, because the body changes not because we think about things, but because we allow things to reset. So stay tuned. Hello and welcome to Ask Dr. Gill. I am your host, Dr. Gill Winkelman. And today on the podcast, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever understood exactly why you react to something the way you do and then still react the same way? And knowing that doesn't stop you from having that reaction. And I'm going to get to a minute why that is happening and why that's important to understand. But knowing your attachment style doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to react in that way based on the attachment style, or understanding your childhood dynamics isn't going to make you not react in a particular way. Or if you can name your trauma, you may still react in a way that the trauma is alive and well. And your body will still brace, you still might collapse, you might get anxious, you might get inflamed. And insight changes the narrative sometimes, but it doesn't necessarily change the frequency. And I think this is something that is misunderstood sometimes. And the thing is that we have people talking about this in the literature, in podcasts, and so forth. The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel, Gabor Mate talks about this, Peter Levine. I mean, there's lots of people talking about this. And yet we still seem to fall back into this idea that if I understand it, it should be fixed. If I see the pattern, I should stop. And I think that what we don't understand is the visceral level, the embodiment of this. Only the nervous system can help us feel safe. And the thing about it is that it's a frequency state, not a concept or a conceptual state. It's more about how does the physiology experience the world, not how does our intellect experience the world. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we live in a society that pulls those two things apart. And I actually heard this years ago about, and I can't remember who it was now, talking about neckties. That neckties are something that cut off our heart from our head, and you could think about it from a chakra perspective. I haven't talked about chakras on this show, but you've got your sixth chakra, your head. The necktie is around your fifth, so you don't speak what it is in your heart to speak. And now your head and your heart are separated, your sixth and your fourth chakra, to speak in those terms, if that's a language you use. Healing requires a bottom-up approach. And there are aspects of this, and I can talk about this in terms of the chakras at a later time, because oftentimes it's the first, second, and third chakras that determine what we're going to do in the world, because those are the ones that are about us living in the world. And it's easy to say, oh, I'm not going to get upset at the other drivers. I love using this example, because it's so universal for us and innocuous, for most of the time. I'm not going to get upset about the other drivers. But then when you get behind the wheel and you start driving, you start cursing them out. That's part of the dynamic that's happening, right? Now, awareness is important because what awareness does is it helps us see the pattern. And I don't want to underestimate that fact and say, oh, it's not important, because it is important. Because without knowing it, you don't know that you're doing what you're doing. If you don't know you get angry when you're driving and don't have an insight about that, you can't change your behavior. If you don't know that you have an anxious attachment style, you can't calm yourself down when you're feeling anxious in your relationship. And neither can your partner, right? And so knowledge is important. I don't want to say that it isn't. Insight gives us meaning sometimes, or perspective, or a narrative coherence. But it doesn't relax the bracing. It doesn't shift the autonomic nervous system, and it certainly doesn't restore energetic flow properly. And the metaphor I'm going to use is a surfing metaphor because that's, I like surfing. Just knowing if you're watching from the beach and you're watching someone catch a wave, just having that insight, oh, well, they paddle and then they stand up. That doesn't mean that when you go out to the water that you're going to be able to know how to pop up and balance on a board. And there's muscular contractions that need to happen to allow that to happen. And most of it, by the way, is core strength. And for a lot of people, they can't grab that. They don't have that core strength, at least not at the get-go. And so they find it extremely hard. I remember I took a friend surfing one time, and it wasn't the core strength that was the issue for him. It was his neck strength. And he said, oh, my neck. The next day he says, oh, my neck hurts so much. And part of that is how he was holding his head up, because you actually have to use more of these inner back muscles, or in your mid back, and not your traps as much as your rhomboids. I'm getting a little too technical here, but that's sort of the same idea. It's like, how do you build these energetic muscles so that you can deal with the situation in a particular way? Now, once you're in the water, you have to be in the water, rather. You have to be in the water to engage those muscles in the appropriate way. You can't necessarily do that without trying. And so this is, but the insight, oh, I need to hold my back up in a particular way. That's the intellectual piece of it that's important. And then there's another aspect, which is, how do you use that muscles? How do you create the muscle memory? And I think that oftentimes psychology is similar, right? Therapy provides the context of the training in certain ways and the awareness, but life is what gives you the experience of that. And so oftentimes when we're learning something new in relationship, for example, it's really useful to let the other person know, hey, this is new for me. It's like putting the sticker on your car, this is a new driver. Student driver, stay back, be patient, whatever it is. It's that idea. And sometimes I joke with friends. It's like, when you're learning something new, you need a sticker on your forehead that says, I am learning how to manage my anger, or whatever it is. Please be patient. I mean, it's kind of that same idea. And as you kind of learn and experience situations, you begin to change your behavior, right? But awareness is part of that, but it's the embodied state that is the other energetic state. So I'm going to take a quick break, and on the second half of the show, I'm going to talk about this in terms of frequency and what you can do about it. So stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Ask Dr. Gill. I am Dr. Gill Winkelman, your host. And today on the podcast, we're talking about why insight isn't enough and what when awareness doesn't change the body and what it is that you need to do to change. Before I continue, what I want to just remind people is if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email me at info at askdrgill.com, askdrgil.com. And I'm really happy to answer questions if you have them. And you can also check out my website. There's a form on there. It's askdrgill.com, askdrgil.com. And be sure if you go there to check out my courses, I'm actually offering one in March that you can check out in person in Hawaii. And I haven't put up yet how to sign up. It's through my local yoga studio that I'll be doing it. And so they're handling all the signups. So I'll put a link on there when I get it from them. And so you can sign up that way. So let's talk about what we do with the insight, because I think, again, the insight is important. What do we do with it? And I think I mentioned at the beginning that it's repetition. Well, what are we repeating? Like, and so the awareness is about understanding, oh, here I am. I'm going to experience this and feel this and notice what's going on internally. So you're noticing when the felt sense, what do I mean by that? I mean, what do you feel like in your body? And you can do that right now. You can kind of check in, take a deep breath and say, all right, what am I feeling in my body? Am I feeling safe? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling worried? Am I feeling grounded? Am I feeling am I feeling ungrounded? What is going on internally? And knowing that is important. Am I feeling pain? Am I feeling tightness? Am I feeling relaxed? And oftentimes what happens for people is they become aware of the tension in their system. And this is part of the reason why people stop meditating. It's not that meditation makes you anxious. It's that meditation brings awareness to the underlying state. And so oftentimes, this is why people don't go beyond insight, is because, oh, there's something there. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to feel that. And the thing is that feeling the experience allows it to move. There's nothing you need to necessarily do about it. There's no blame, right? There's no blame. There's no, oh, this would be different if. It's more about how do I experience this state and allow it to shift, because it will shift every time. Everything shifts. Everything is always shifting. And so being aware of those micro shifts in the felt sense gives us space to sort of allow the nervous system to relax. And then you begin to start having a new relationship with the experience, with the symptoms. And, and I just want to say that sometimes we require, I'll say, palliation before we can move on. And the example I am thinking of is it's really hard to meditate if you have a migraine headache. Having had migraine headaches, I can attest to this personally. It's really hard to meditate when your head is pounding. And so taking something to relieve the headache, there's no shame in that, right? I mean, you certainly want to understand the underlying cause of that, whatever, however that meaning is, right? Either physiologically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever that is. But in the moment, you're not going to figure it out. And I think it's important to recognize that. And so what I'd like to offer is some practical ideas here. Ask yourself, where does my body tighten or tense when I talk about a particular issue? Do I have troubles bringing the issue up at all? Does my breathing change? Does my posture change? What happens if I soften 1%, 2%, 3%, like low level? What happens? How does it shift? It's interesting because in yoga, one of the things I've learned is if your hips are tight, your jaw is tight, and vice versa. So if you can loosen one, the other will loosen. And so oftentimes there are energetic and vibrational patterns that store in the muscles, but they mirror each other in different ways. And so that's kind of the piece about it that kind of comes through. So I'm going to leave you with that. I hope you really enjoyed this. Be sure to check out the workshop that I'm offering in March, and I will do something similar online, just so you know. Uh, the title is Listening Beyond Symptoms, How to Let Go of Our Embodied Stories and Heal. And so the focus of it is, how is the energy body speaking to us? And what are the stories we tell ourselves that we need to uncover to allow for healing? And oftentimes, and I've talked about this on the show multiple times, oftentimes we tell ourselves stories about our health that prevent us from healing. So check it out on my website. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.